Welcome to my video on the final scene from A Good Man is Hard to Find. This video is obnoxiously edited as I find the grandmother character. I am not sorry for what you are about to endure. Hello and welcome to my way too in-depth look at A Good Man is Hard to Find by Flannery O'Conner. So in this I will be explaining my interpretation of the final scene in which the grandmother character touches the Misfit and what I believe this scene represents. So while this video will be posted on my YouTube channel, it's also doubling as a school assignment.
Hi, Professor Perry. I hope you're having a good day.
So there's generally two schools of thought about this scene. One in which that it means that the grandmother is being redeemed in some sort of way, and the other school of thought which means that the grandmother is doing this in sort of one last act to save herself. And I'm actually going to be breaking this down into 5 different sections as to why I believe what I believe. So the first section will be the overall story, the grandmother, the misfit, morals, and what the final scene means.
Part 1. The Story.
So the overall story of A Good Man is Hard to Find is about a family that's going on a road trip to Florida. The family consists of Bailey, the father, his wife, his 2 children, John Wesley and June Starr, a baby, and the grandmother. Basically, while they're on the road trip, they stop at a diner, not very much happens. But the grandmother, while they're driving, remembers a secret panel in a house on the way and gets the children to bully their father into going. Only then does the grandmother realize that she's been remembering the house is actually in a different state, and she scares her cat, causing a car crash, and a murderer called the Misfit shows up and murders the entire family. Now, that's really the bare bones of what happens in this story, and I won't be going into full details due to time. Look up the synopsis on Wikipedia if you really want to know. But I covered the important parts for this video for the most part. So the story really highlights the way we apply labels indiscriminately. The grandmother often changes her definition of a good man, and usually this definition has nothing to do with actual things that make you a good person. A good man to the grandmother, someone who just fits in with her values. It's a commentary on how our definition of what makes someone good also shifts as well. So people also often argue there's a theme of grace in the story, showing that everyone can be saved by God. The grandmother and the misfit both have the ability to change and to be saved by God, and the grandmother, it's possible, repent at the end of the story, and how the misfit says there's no pleasure in the life. It may hint he's gonna change his ways. I, however, instead see this as not grace, but showing how humans always have the ability to change, and as well as humans tend to search for meaning in life, and sometimes religion offers that meaning, but that doesn't mean they fully believe it.
Part 2. The Grandmother.
So, the grandmother is probably one of my top 10 most hated short story characters of all time, and I've read a lot of short stories, so I frankly find nothing redeeming about this woman, and I feel only contempt for her. She routinely calls herself a lady throughout the story, but does nothing to act like one. She's rude, she's loud, she's a liar, she undermines her son and daughter-in-law's authority with their children, and she cannot take responsibility for her actions. However, she thinks herself a lady and tends to carry and act as such. Because of this, she immediately assumes herself to be better than most people she meets. The grandmother actually only relates to Red Sammy, in my opinion, because he trusts people blindly and shares her nostalgic views. And they both believe that, truly believe that finding a good man is too hard in this modern day. However, the grandmother never turns the eye on herself. She never looks at her own hypocrisy and rudeness. She literally compares the mother's face to a cabbage, which is not cool. That's your daughter-in-law. She sneaks a cat into her car as if it's no big deal, and she opts to tell nobody she made a mistake about the secret panel, nor does she take responsibility when she is responsible for the car crash. The most telling thing for me is when she's face to face with a misfit, she only pleads for her life, not for the life of her children, or her son, or her grandchildren. She thinks only of herself in that moment, which is not really a way a lady would act. Throughout the story, it's routinely shown that the grandmother is just a selfish character and one who only really cares about herself.
Part 3. The Misfit.
So, the Misfit is the character we spend the least amount of time with in the actual story, but we actually get a really clear understanding of his character in that literal interaction. The Misfit is a character who's searching for meaning in his life, but also understands it's meaningless at times. He acknowledges that there's a lack of meaning in life, but that doesn't stop him from searching. I know this sounds like a contradiction, but it actually shows a really human thing. We all know we're insignificant on the grand scheme, but we're all still looking for individual meaning in our lives. He has strong convictions and is very consistent in his behavior. He has his own view of life, one that we may not agree with, but he always acts according to. Unlike the grandmother, he questions his life and his place for it, working as a sort of philosopher at times. Like with his quote of how punishments never fit the crime. He's not really a reliable character in the sense of it's hard to believe a lot of the things that he says about his own life, but we still understand he has a strong moral code of sorts. He knows he's not a good man, but he also knows he's not the worst, and this means he's very self-aware compared to the grandmother character.
Part 4. Morals.
A big thing in this story is the difference between the morals of the two characters, the grandmother and the misfit. We can see in the small scene that the misfit has his own set of morals, but one he sticks completely to. On a different hand, the grandmother seems to lack a clear set of morals. She's claims to be a lady, but does not act like one. She judges her daughter-in-law for being unable to control her children, yet encourages the children to be unruly. She doesn't even stick to the morals of her religion, questioning if Lazarus really did raise the dead. Essentially, the villain is the one with the stronger moral code in this story, while our victim, or hero, or protagonist, whatever you want to call her, she's the one with the more gray morals. Now, this is turning the trope on its head, which is usually the other way around, but it does actually help and highlights an important thing that the story is trying to tell.
Part 5. The Scene.
So, when the grandmother touches the misfit is a scene that a lot of people debate. It's the scene that a lot of people assume that the whole story rests on, and I believe the entire story rests on it as well. The question is, what does it mean? So, you are always welcome to have your own interpretation, but based off of what I've established here, the grandmother isn't a good person. She lies, she projects, she does whatever she needs to get her way. She isn't a consistent character. She's a hypocrite. In the final scene, she's only focused on saving herself. Like I said, many people believe that when she touches the misfit, she's having a redemption arc, that she can be saved by grace. I personally don't agree with this at all. I think this is the grandmother's one last attempt to save herself. She's made an assumption about the misfit, and she's hoping she can manipulate him into not killing her, claiming he would never kill a lady. Like I said, she's got no strong set of morals. She didn't even beg for the children's lives. She let them die without any effort, but she is making an effort to try and save herself. I think the reason the misfit acts so harshly and shoots her like that is because he recognizes this ugliness in her. The part of her that's willing to change herself to fit whatever it takes to survive. Not bad survival instincts at all, but not the best character morally. Being a man with strong morals, I think it disgusts him to see how he's acting, and I think he reacts on instinct because he did see that she didn't beg for the children or anyone else's lives, but went so far to try and save her own.
Conclusion.
So, what is the story saying? I think it highlights a lot of flaws in humanity that we don't really talk about. How good isn't so black and white and evil is evil. I would never argue that the grandmother is a worse person than the misfit due to him being a murderer, but she's definitely portrayed that way. I think the story is just trying to make us question a little bit about ourselves. I mean, we can definitely see ourselves in a lot of these characters. You know, questioning our place in the world, those who are stuck up and think themselves higher of others. I think it's really meant to shine a light back on people. And I think it shines a light on America as a whole. The story shows how a criminal somehow has a higher sense of morals than a lady. And I think that's the way that America has sort of made people work. America kind of has, especially in this time, has made people, have to be moldable. We have to change who we are to fit what capitalism and what society wants, and with less focus on just being yourself and questioning our existence. It's a sad but truthful fact that this is just how people are. More people would rather be like the Misfit in the sense of having a strong moral code, and honestly, I think we're all more like the grandmother. And I think that's why I hate the grandmother character so much. I see the worst parts of myself reflected back in her.